Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, connect the dots on the really critical stories from this week. We've dug into the world this week from The Economist, September 11th, 2025, plus some other deep articles. Our mission? Help you understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Geopolitics, AI, culture, it's all connected. Okay, let's unpack this.
Absolutely. And there's just so much information out there. It can be, well, overwhelming. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
To go beyond just the headlines and explore the why and maybe the what's next.
Right. Let's kick off with global tensions. Seems like things are really ratcheting up on several fronts. That situation between NATO and Russia, for instance, it feels like it's hit a new level.
It really has. These Russian drones, they breached Polish airspace pretty extensively. We're talking the most far-reaching intrusion into NATO territory since 1949.
Since 49.
Yeah. And Poland's Prime Minister Tusk, he basically said it brings NATO closer to open conflict. And what makes it, particularly worrying is the timing. It's happening right as Russia's doing its Zapad war games in Belarus. Those exercises. They explicitly simulate attacking NATO. And these weren't small drones. 19 of them went 300 kilometers into Poland. The Dutch actually helped shoot some down.
A direct test then, really, and the U.S. response. President Trump apparently called it feeble online.
Feeble, yeah, that was the word.
So beyond the tweets, what are the deeper implications here? For NATO's credibility, its resolve.
Well, that's the core issue, isn't it? And the sources point to this sort of urgency deficit in Europe. You've got Russia basically flying drones into the EU, but the response on defense spending, on arms production, it's been slow. Europe looks in peril, as one source put it. The critical thing is if NATO looks timid now, it's not just about a slow reaction. It actually, raises the risk of sleepwalking into a bigger war. It signals something about political will.
So it's about perception as much as capability. How NATO responds defines its credibility. Okay, let's shift to the Middle East. Israel's actions outside its borders are also making waves, big ones.
That's right. There was the bombing of a villa in Doha, in Qatar. Israel claimed senior Hamas officials were meeting there. 6 people died. Hamas, though, denies any leaders were killed.
And Qatar's reaction?
They called it state terrorism. And significantly, U.S. officials denied knowing about it beforehand. They apparently found out after.
So the implication is?
Well, it could really jeopardize America's standing in the Gulf. And it definitely undermines the Abraham Accords. Those accords were meant to build bridges between Israel and Gulf states. Even Donald Trump said he felt very badly about the attack, that it didn't help U.S. or Israeli goals. Shows how interconnected everything is there.
That interconnectedness is key. Direct military action obviously raises tension. But global influence, it's not always about bombs, right? It's economic leverage, political pressure, like in Latin America, what's happening with Trump's Monroe 2.0.
Yeah, it's becoming much clearer. This Monroe 2.0 involves aggressive anti-drug ops, military stuff like destroying that Venezuelan speedboat, but also direct political interference, calling the Bolsonaro trial in Brazil a witch hunt, for example, using tariffs to pressure governments. The main goal really seems to be pushing back against China's growing influence down there, which is tricky because many South American countries trade more with China now than the U.S. So it's this multi-pronged strategy trying to reassert U.S. dominance where things are, well, pretty fluid geopolitically.
Okay, from global hotspots to domestic dramas, political stability feels a bit shaky in places. Let's start in the UK. Sir Keir Starmer's Labour government, a huge majority, but seems to be on unsteady ground.
Definitely. He's facing real questions about his political judgment. Had to sack Peter Mandelson, the U.S. ambassador, after new details about his links to Jeffrey Epstein emerged. And just days before that, Angela Rayner, his deputy leader, resigned over underpaying tax, which looks bad given she was, in charge of housing policy.
Oh.
Yeah. So Labour, despite this massive majority, is described as a beached whale, kind of paralyzed while public support drops. The interesting insight here is maybe the main fight in British politics now isn't just left versus right. It's within these political blocs. It suggests it's kind of fragmentation.
A new battle for Britain fought internally. Interesting. And then Japan saw an even faster leadership change.
Yeah, remarkably fast. Ishiba Shigeru resigned as PM after less than a year, lost the upper house election in July, so The ruling LDP, they're holding another election October 4th. It'll be Japan's fifth prime minister in just 5 years.
5 years, wow.
Yeah, and it comes at this momentous juncture, as the source calls it. Pressure from China, the new U.S. trade deal under Trump. The key point is that this constant churn makes this leadership contest really important, maybe unusually consequential, as Japan tries to navigate some very tricky waters.
Political fragility seems like a theme. And tragically in the U.S., something happened that really highlights the growing political polarization.
The murder of Charlie Kirk, yeah. The founder of Turning Point USA, only 31, killed on a college campus in Utah. He was obviously known for challenging liberal views, firing up young conservatives. Trump even credited him for helping with the youth vote in 24.
It's just terrible.
It is. And the grim insight, really, is that even though surveys show Americans reject political violence, overwhelmingly reject it, there's this public conversation, as one analysis put it, that basically says you'll get attention, maybe even praise, if you hurt someone publicly. And that seems to be fueling these acts. It's deeply worrying for civic discourse.
Truly is. Okay, let's pivot now from those divides to the world of technology. Specifically, the massive AI investment boom. It's got everyone buzzing, right? Some excitement, maybe some nervousness, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's already one of the biggest investment booms, historically speaking. Analysts think spending on data centers worldwide will top, what, $3 trillion by the end of 2028?
$3 trillion.
Yeah. Look at Oracle. Stock jumped by a third, landed a huge $300 billion contract with OpenAI for data center capacity, made Larry Ellison the world's richest man, briefly. But, and this is a big but, there are serious warnings about irrational exuberance, comparisons to dot-com stocks in '99. Even Sam Altman says investors are overexcited about AI.
That dot-com comparison always makes you pause. Is there an argument, though, that, I don't know, this time it's different, given how fundamental AI seems? What's the real risk beyond just a market dip?
That's a really good question. AI is foundational, sure. But the key insight for investors, maybe beyond just bubble risk, is the nature of this spending. Over half of it goes on servers, specialized chips, stuff that's obsolete in just a few years.
Right, not like railways or fiber optic cables that last decades.
Exactly. It might leave less of an enduring legacy. So maybe it demands a more agile investment approach, less long-term speculation. Plus, individual Americans are more exposed to the stock market than ever. Stocks are like 30% of household net worth. Makes people more vulnerable to an AI crash than maybe in past booms.
So it's the scale and the specific type of capital involved. Interesting. But amidst this whole rush for, these godlike large language models, LLMs, the big ones like ChatGPT, there's this other trend emerging towards smaller AI models.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Faith in those huge do-everything LLMs might be waning a bit in some areas. Businesses, early adopters, they're looking more at small language models, SLMs. Why? Well, they're cheaper.
Okay.
They can be tailored for specific tasks. Like that IBM guy, David Cox, said, your HR chatbot doesn't need to know advanced physics.
Makes sense. More efficient, too.
More efficient, especially for devices like smartphones. NVIDIA Research even thinks SLMs are the future for agentic AI. You build specialized agents like Lego blocks. The really profound insight here could be that this validates companies like Apple, maybe, who haven't poured billions into massive cloud LLMs. It hints at a more decentralized, practical AI future.
A significant strategic shift, potentially. And AI isn't just software, is it? It's changing hardware, military strategy, particularly navies. What's this Top Gun without Maverick idea?
Yeah, it's a dramatic change. Navies are basically reinventing aircraft carriers for the drone age. Countries like the US, Turkey, France, China, they're all developing these loyal wingman drones that fly alongside crewed jets. China's got these new Type 076 ships that can launch big drones.
And the appeal is?
Drones are just less costly to lose, easier to replace, and easier to sustain. Simple as that. You can have more of them, use them more aggressively. So this move towards hybrid air wings, dispersed forces, it's set to drive massive changes in how navies operate, their tactics. The insight isn't just add drones, it's a whole rethink of naval power, prioritizing resilience, numbers over maybe individual, super expensive assets.
That's a fundamental shift. Okay, moving from tech to broader forces, economics, demographics. One huge story, often kind of simmering in the background, is the global fertility crash.
Right.
This isn't just a slow drift downwards, is it?
No, far from it. Only about a third of the world's population now lives in countries with fertility high enough to sustain population growth. And even there, rates are dropping fast. The global population peak, it's likely coming much sooner than we thought, maybe the 2050s. Might never even hit 9 billion before it starts shrinking.
Never hit 9 billion. That's a big revision.
It is. And what's really insightful, profoundly so, is that policies to boost birth rates, pro-natalist policies, they've largely failed. Even huge spending, like Hungary putting 6% of its GDP into it, hasn't really reversed the trend. Often it just changes when people have kids, not the total number. The takeaway seems to be, pay attention, yes, but don't panic.
Okay, so if populations shrink in age, what does that actually mean economically? Is it the disaster scenario we sometimes hear? Or can economies, adapt?
They absolutely can adapt. It's not necessarily a catastrophe. We're already seeing things change. Labor participation rates are rising. People are working longer. The average worker in rich countries works 4 years longer now than in 2000.
3 years longer.
Yeah, and older workers are getting more productive. Also, surprisingly, young people cost governments a lot, too, with longer education periods. Investment might dip, sure, but capital deepening, giving fewer workers better tools, better tech, that can boost productivity significantly. Research even suggests consumption per person doesn't actually change much whether populations grow or shrink.
That's counterintuitive.
It is. But the key insight is that while demographics shift, human ingenuity, technology, especially AI, could really help drive innovation even with fewer workers. Economies can find new ways to thrive.
That's a much more optimistic take than you often hear. Okay, speaking of adapting, let's look at China. Their domestic economy has some surprising consumer shifts happening.
Yeah, this phenomenon called Dalifornication, a boom in domestic tourism, but to more laid-back places like Dali. And it's not just rich city dwellers downgrading their holidays. What's really interesting is that lower-income households in China seem to be traveling and spending more this year.
Really? Lower income spending up.
Seems so. Retail spending growth in smaller cities is actually outpacing places like Beijing. It suggests maybe a shift in consumer power, maybe a better outlook on the property crisis in those smaller cities. It's an unexpected bright spot anyway.
Interesting internal dynamics.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, China's trade seems to be defying U.S. tariffs. What's happening there?
It really is quite striking. Despite all the tough talk from Trump, the deepest, darkest China rhetoric, the high tariffs, China's total exports actually rose 6% year on year between June and August.
Rose, despite the tariffs.
Rose. Sales to Africa, up by a third. To ASEAN countries, up by a fifth. And Europe now buys over 60% more Chinese goods than the U.S. does. It basically shows the rest of the world is, well, willing to trade with China, even if Trump sees it as being ripped off. And China's Belt and Road Initiative is expanding faster than ever, building strong ties, especially in the global south. The core insight. While the U.S. focuses on tariffs, China's busy diversifying its trade, strengthening its global footprint elsewhere.
A definite rerouting of global trade happening. Okay, and quickly, Europe's economy. Despite all the political mess we talked about, are there any green shoots?
Yes, actually. The economy there is finally showing signs of recovery. Manufacturing, business sentiment, they're both up. Inflation's nearly beaten, down to 2.1%. Interest rates have come down. So even with, the French government collapsing twice over budgets and Trump's tariffs looming, European companies seem to be adapting, diversifying, finding new markets. There's investment going into tech, too, from the European Investment Bank. The insight is, despite the headwinds, there's an underlying resilience there. Strategic investments are helping it find its feet.
Yeah, good to hear some positive signs. Okay, let's turn now to some quite alarming public health news.
Yeah.
A dangerous new kind of synthetic opioid.
Yes, this is really serious. Nitazines. These drugs were actually developed back in the 1950s, but they were never approved medically. Now they're popping up worldwide.
And they're dangerous because?
They can be hundreds of times stronger than heroin, even dozens of times stronger than fentanyl. And we know fentanyl killed nearly 50,000 Americans last year alone.
Dozens of times stronger than fentanyl.
Yeah. And the really distressing insight here is that their spread seems to be a direct result of crackdowns on fentanyl and opium. It's created a vacuum in the drug supply.
Yeah.
And these little understood, incredibly dangerous nitazines are filling that gap. It shows how adaptable, how insidious these drug markets are.
A truly frightening development.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's shift gear completely to something lighter, but maybe just as insightful culturally. Pop music.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing a particular trend with young female artists.
We really are. There's this wave. Artists like Sabrina Carpenter, Dua Lipa, Chappell Roan, they're mixing these super catchy tunes with lyrics that, well, grumble about mediocre men.
Mediocre men.
Yeah, and the songs really reflect a bigger social shift. Women, particularly in richer countries, have more economic power now. They're being choosier about partners. They're more willing to, as one article nicely put it, hold out for someone who'll do the watching up.
So pop music is a reflection of economic independence.
Exactly. The cultural insight is how directly it mirrors this widening gap between young men and women, especially when you consider almost 60% of U.S. university graduates are women now. It's the sound of changing gender dynamics.
Fascinating how culture acts as that barometer. And even design classics, they're getting modern twists that tell a story too.
Oh, absolutely. William Morris's Strawberry Thief print, it's everywhere. Mugs, cushions, even apparently on the seats of nuclear submarines.
Submarines, seriously.
Seriously. Despite the fact that Morris himself was fiercely against mass production, the irony is huge. And it gets better. AI is now generating pastiches of his designs, available all over the online marketplaces. The insight is just how enduring design can be. It transcends its original creator's intent, gets adapted by new technologies, even technologies Morris probably would have hated. Speaks to the power of aesthetics.
A powerful legacy indeed. And finally, a look back at a true fashion titan we lost recently, Giorgio Armani. What was his lasting impact?
Armani died at 91. He was a master. Someone who really freed the forms of both men and women, as the tribute put it. He took the stiffness out of suits, used softer fabrics like crepe, softer colors, created that whole Armani man look. And for women, his suits gave this fluid confidence, not rigid power dressing. He built this huge $9-11 billion empire based on elegance, not flashy extravagance.
And fiercely independent, right?
Fiercely independent, resisted the big French luxury conglomerates. His success was also deeply linked to movies dressing Richard Gere in American Gigolo, countless Hollywood stars. The key insight, I think, is that Armani wasn't just selling clothes, he was selling a lifestyle, a vision of understated sophistication that profoundly shaped global fashion for decades. A singular vision.
What an incredible deep dive that was. Just covering so much ground this week, from, the high-stakes games in Europe and the Middle East to how AI is evolving, those demographic shifts changing our future, even pop music trends. It's clear the world is just in constant dynamic flux.
It really is. And it's a reminder, isn't it, that beneath all the headlines, there are these deep currents reshaping, well, everything. Our societies, our economies. Being able to spot those shifts, think about the connections, it feels more critical than ever.
So what does this all mean for you listening? I guess it means staying curious, right? Asking questions, understanding that things that seem separate are often connected in surprising ways. We covered so much. Russian drones testing NATO, the rise of smaller AI, that global fertility shift quietly happening, pop songs reflecting economic power.
It brings up a really critical question, I think. As technology speeds everything up, as global power shifts, are we actually becoming more adaptable, more resilient as a global society? Or are we maybe just creating new, even more complex challenges for ourselves with every step forward?
That is definitely something to ponder. We really hope this deep dive gave you a richer picture of the world this week. Maybe spark some new questions. Until next time, keep digging into those details and connecting the dots.